I'm confident that one of two things are going to happen when it comes to the fiscal cliff. Number one, we're going to see an agreement in the next 48 hours, in which case middle-class taxes will not go up. If that doesn't happen, then Democrats in the Senate will put a bill on the floor of the Senate, and Republicans will have to decide if they're going to block it, which will mean that middle-class taxes do go up. I don't think they would want to do that politically, but they may end up doing it.
That, of course, from our interview just moments ago with the president. I sat down with him yesterday at the White House. He's putting the onus squarely on congressional leaders to either do a comprehensive package now or a short-term solution to prevent middle-class taxes from going up. Joining me now, NBC News political director and our chief White House correspondent, Chuck Todd, NBC News special correspondent, Tom Brokaw, author of the best-selling New York Times best-selling book, Thomas Jefferson, The Art of Power, John Meacham, columnist for the New York Times, David Brooks, and presidential historian, author of the Lincoln biography, Team of Rivals, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Welcome to all of you. David Brooks, let me start with you. My big takeaway, the president is setting a tone here with Republicans, putting them on notice that, yes, taxes are going to go up, and that he's going to drive a pretty hard bargain on a lot of different issues rather than try to bring them into the fold. He doesn't feel like compromise is going to work at this point.
Yeah, well, first, let's say what's happening in Washington right now is pathetic. When you think about what the Revolutionary generation did, what the Civil War generation did, what the World War II generation did, we're asking not to bankrupt our children, and we've got a shambolic, dysfunctional process. Now, I think most of the blame still has to go to the Republicans. They've had a brain freeze since the election. They have no strategy. You don't know what they want, and they haven't decided what they want. But if I default President Obama, I would say that sometimes he governs like a visitor from a morally superior civilization. He comes in here and he will not, he'll talk with Boehner. He won't talk with the other Republicans. He hasn't built the trust. Boehner actually made a pretty serious concession, $800 billion in tax revenues, probably willing to go up on rates. But the trust wasn't there to get that done. And if the president wants to get stuff done over the next 4 years, it's got to be a lot more than making the intellectual concessions. It's got to get to the place where Republicans say, okay, we'll take a risk and this guy won't screw us. Mm-hmm. They do not feel that right now.
Chuck, just your reading of the immediate news that's going to be made over the course of today and tomorrow. Again, what I think is significant, the president saying we either get this deal now or we'll go over the cliff. We'll come back right after the first of the year and we'll try to get the tax cut through again. But the Republicans are going to be forced to be in a position they're going to have to say no because we'll put it on the floor.
Yeah, there didn't seem to be a sense of urgency of, oh, my God, we can't go over the cliff, right? The president was laying it out. You know what? We might go over. This is how we're going to deal with it once we go over. We're not going to end up, in the long term raising taxes on everybody. But he seemed to be not making today do or die, not making the next 48 hours the big thing here, which it'll be interesting to see if that's how the Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, who is the key here, right? Does he sign off on a deal? If he signs off on a deal, something will happen. Does he read that and say, boy, we need to take this tax issue off the table? He's been a big believer of this. Take the tax issue off give the president his tax hikes on the rich now. Fight him on everything else when taxes aren't part of the conversation. Fight him on everything else in 6 weeks when the debt ceiling is hit, or perhaps it ends up 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whenever that fight happens, and do that. I do think that McConnell, that's where he wants to be. Can he get there in the next 24 hours? That's what we don't know.
Tom Brokaw?
Well, it seems to me that the middle class is going to have a date for the prom. I mean, everybody's talking about protecting the middle class here. So I think this deal will probably get done around the middle class tax cut. It's at what level? Is it $400,000 or $250,000 or some other number, which is going to be critically important? A lot of people don't realize that in the large urban and suburban areas of America, $250,000 doesn't make you rich. You got 2 kids in college at $60,000. If you're a boomer, you may have a dependent parent of some kind. You're spending another $20,000, $25,000 on. So we have to have the definition of what is the middle class. To David's point, I do really believe that the president doesn't work hard enough at bringing everybody into the White House and rolling up his sleeves, having them up in the living quarters, getting them around the table and saying, how do we get this deal done? He didn't talk downstream about tax reform, for example. And I think it would have been helpful to him this morning to have said, look, we get this tax deal done. I'm here to help on Medicare and Social Security reforms. We've got to address those instead of just saying, I'm going to protect the seniors who are there and the Medicare and Medicaid recipients. Give a little something to show good faith about what needs to be done on deficit reduction in the entitlement program.
Doris, Republicans I've talked to in the last couple of days on Capitol Hill have said, look, the president meeting with all the congressional leaders, it's the first time that's happened since November 16th. This is not somebody who's been actively engaged in negotiating. He's basically saying, yet again, I've won. We're going to get this through. But the president says no. It's Republicans who just won't say yes to reasonable proposals.
Well, that may be the conclusion that he's drawn. I mean, we don't really know what's gone on. Invitations put out, not necessarily accepted. What interested me about the tone of his talk with you was that I think he's learned from that first term where he was arguingly explaining things. He talked simply in this thing. He talked conversationally. He repeated over and over again his own points, fairness, balance. He talked about middle class out rather than from the bottom up. That seems to be a new phrase. And I think he's learned what Theodore Roosevelt had learned, that when you're speaking to the American people and you want to make an argument, it has to be simple. Maybe, as Theodore Roosevelt said, my Harvard buddies might think it's commonplace, but I thought he spoke in a different tone today, more conversational, and that's something you learned from your first term, where he thought he had spoken too much over people's heads or too explanatory.
John Meacham, there was something else I wanted to pick up on. The president's obvious irritation, Chuck was just mentioning it before we started, at the notion that it's a pox on both houses.
Right.
And one of the president's top advisors is rather defensive on Twitter, saying that it should bug every American because it's lazy journalism and punditry and has a real effect on our political system. Well, here's the reality that even his advisors have to understand. The American people, Republicans and Democrats, do look at results, or the lack thereof. So it's not lazy punditry when people are out there very frustrated with both ends of this.
Right. And they see the system as broken because, as you say, it doesn't produce a desirable result.
Right. Being right is not enough, even if you're the president.
Exactly.
Even if you believe you're right, it doesn't necessarily get a result.
You know, presidential politics is about wholesale and retail, as we say, in the trade. And so today, this morning, he was doing a wholesale sell. He was using the bully pulpit. He was talking to you. He was making an intellectual case and trying to say, I won. This is what you voted for. This is what we adjudicated in the election. But on the retail side, as Tom says, all evidence suggests he has not been the warmest and fuzziest of cajolers. And you have to do both. And you can't just be right on the idea. You do have to sell this. And even the greatest presidents, let's be clear, Ronald Reagan, the modern era, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, they sold their initial deals in the first year, Kemp Roth for Reagan and the tax rates for Clinton. And it was close. It was 1, 2, 3 votes. It was very tight. But they did it, and they pushed on both the wholesale and the retail.
I don't think you can have the congressman over too often. I think they should be there sleeping with you if you want them to be. But on the other hand, he's
some people in trouble.
I didn't quite.
These Civil War era people, Doris,
But I think he finally has made a decision, perhaps, that the inside game didn't work. He said that, which means you mobilize the outside game.
But his inability to try the inside game. But let's make sure. We are about to come up on the least productive Congress in history. We have it in mathematical terms. 218 bills this Congress has passed. It's the lowest number since this has been tracked. The lowest number before that was 333. Let's go through the highlights of this Congress. No farm bill. By the way, milk prices should be going up. People have talked about the milk cliff. That debacle we saw in the Senate on the UN Disability Treaty right in front of Bob Dole. That was just a bizarre moment, if you will. This fiscal cliff, 3 budget standoffs. This Congress has been uniquely atrocious.
Tom.
The fact is that the system is rigged. 75% of the congressmen come from gerrymandered districts in which they're bulletproof. They only play to one constituency. There are no swing states. They don't go home and have to prove their case because they've got a choir back home. And that's a huge part of the problem here. There's another reality in this town today. We need a lighter moment here. A lot of folks, as I was coming into the office today, said they got to get this done by kickoff time tonight.
Exactly.
It's a good thing. No, it's a good thing NBC moved this kickoff to prime time. It's very important that happens.
RGT and the Redskins could clinch today. That's not important.